This is the EasySMX X20. This is what the controller actually looks like. And I actually never heard of this controller until just a few days ago. So a couple of disclosures about this video. First and foremost, it is a first impressions video after using the controller for a few days. So I won't be necessarily diving into every minute detail. I'll be speaking more to the overall comfort and overall quality of the controller. Now, this is not a comparison video, but I will be mentioning the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro quite a bit because it has been my main controller for the past year. I guess I should start with the why. So why did I pick up the EasySMX X20, especially since I already have the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro? Long story short, this is going to be the second time I've had to warranty a FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro. So in fact, I'm currently in the process of getting the new one shipped to me, which has been really smooth, all things considered. So the reason I'm getting a warranty is for the same reason I've had the previous one warranted for, same exact reason. It's in fact the M1 button right over here that's sort of loose and indented into the controller. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's enough to throw me off. And it does work most of the time, but occasionally it does not register the actual action. Now, it's unfortunate because I will say like the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro controller is probably the best controller I've ever used. And I do plan on continuing to use this controller when I do get a new one shipped to me. However, I was looking for a replacement in the meantime, and I absolutely needed something with 4 paddles. And funny enough, 4 paddles is not the easiest to come by, it seems like, at least for a good quality controller. And it's kind of crazy how there are some companies out there that have not gone beyond the 2-paddle approach yet, despite there being clearly a market for 4 paddles. I'm looking at you, game sir. What gives? So I started looking for an inexpensive controller that was compatible with PC that had 4 paddles, as I use 4 paddles quite often in FPS games such as Splitgate 2 and Halo Infinite. And that's where the EasySMX X20 seemed to fit the bill. I bought the controller for $60 Canadian on Amazon, which is about $40 US, which for all the features that come with it was kind of shocking, to be honest. When we're talking about price to performance, this controller definitely hits above its weight. Now on the front, we have our basic design with thumbsticks, nothing crazy there, the D-pad. The face buttons are mechanical over here, which is actually kind of neat too, because it's kind of hard to tell, but there's actually like lights on the inside of it. So the A, B, and X and Y stand out a little bit. And then you have very short actuating shoulders on the controller, which are awesome. And the triggers do have a trigger lock system, in fact. So right now I'm using them on the mechanical, so shortest distance, and they're really short, very nice and clicky, very responsive. And then of course, linear works just as you would any other controller. And then the back buttons are very familiar to what you would find on the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro. The design is virtually identical for the most part. So in terms of placement, anyways, the back buttons are very much the same. And even the way they feel are virtually the same. The one thing that's worth mentioning is that the 2 middle buttons here sort of have a little bit of a ridge to it. You can kind of see that. So at the most center point, you'll have that bump, if you will, and then you have the ridges more to the side. I guess that gives you more of an idea of where your hands are placed on the controller when you have your fingers in the back there, versus the design on the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro, which just is more of an angled approach, if you will. And what's interesting is that they both have the same back switch at the bottom for compatibility with a dongle or X input if you directly wire them, Bluetooth, and Nintendo Switch. Similar to the Vader 4 Pro, the EasySMX X20 also has some turbo functionality available. Now let's just try to speak to the controller without comparing necessarily to the Vader 4 Pro, which I've done quite a bit of already. The controller itself is definitely stylish with the RGB lighting that it's got on it, and you can actually change that. You can turn it off, turn it brighter, less bright, and you can even change the type of RGB, whether it's a single color, whether it's breathing or colorful, etc., etc. The D-pad itself is clicky for the most part. It doesn't feel like it's anything special, if I'm being honest with you, but it does the job. I'm not someone that plays fighting games necessarily, so I'm guessing if you play fighting games, this might not do the job for you. I'm not entirely sure how it registers in terms of like inputs and whatnot, especially when it comes to diagonal movements, right? So in terms of the analog sticks actually feel very, very smooth. They're Hall effect sticks. And coming from the Vader 4 Pro, once again, I tried not to compare them, but it just happens. Feels very much similar to an extent when it comes to the Hall effect sticks in terms of how smooth they are. One thing that's worth mentioning is I did find the sticks to be a little bit on the smaller side when it comes to surface area. That could just be me. But I guess, once again, coming from the Vader 4 Pro, that seems to have a little bit more thickness to them, a little bit more surface area. It was something to get adjusted to. So when it comes to actually using the controller in game, I had no issues whatsoever with the analog sticks. And in fact, all my dead zones and in-game sensitivities that I had set up, I kept as is. And I absolutely had a smooth experience with the analog sticks. In terms of the actual comfort level, felt comfortable to me. I have no issues with it. It's sort of like a medium-sized controller. It's definitely the Xbox layout, has an Xbox feel to it. So felt very familiar to me and very easy to access all the buttons, all the analog sticks, the bumpers, the triggers. No issues whatsoever. The back buttons as well. Honestly, so far, so good. What's interesting about this controller is that when it comes to the analog sticks, once again, coming back to the analog sticks, you can actually pull them out, the caps, and make your analog sticks taller if you want. And I guess adjust the height. Kind of interesting. Kind of interesting. I'm perfectly happy with the analog sticks at the height that they're at by default, but just worth noting that that's something you can do and customize. Now, I did talk about the face buttons briefly, but they are very visually appealing, I would say, and they are mechanical clicks, and they feel really, really nice to press. Now, with all these features I just mentioned, it's worth noting once again that this controller is $60 Canadian, $40 US, roughly, if you could find it at that price. It's an awesome deal. Price to performance wise, it's very, very competitive. Oh, and this controller does hit the 1000 hertz polling rate with the dongle as well as via USB. So very, very fast, very low latency. And overall, it's very hard to find a competitive controller like this at this price point with all the features that I just listed. Now, there are some drawbacks, but at this price point, they're a little bit easier to overlook. Although I will say one of the first ones that stood out for me was the D-pad. The D-pad is average at best. I don't think it does anything particularly special. And I can't speak to how it would perform in fighting games, for example. Now, this is more personal preference than it is a drawback, and I've already mentioned it, but I would have loved to see the analog sticks have a bit more surface area, just a smidge, but it actually works fine as is. Now, another drawback of the controller is that it doesn't quite feel as premium as something like the Vader 4 Pro, but just keep in mind that the Vader 4 Pro I did pay $100 Canadian for, whereas I'm paying $60 Canadian for this one. So the fact that it feels a little more inexpensive, a little less expensive overall, a little bit more cheap perhaps, is to be expected to an extent. That being said, the controller itself still feels solid. And I have no reason to doubt its durability, but I guess we'll see with time. Before I forget, the EASYSMX X20 is only compatible natively on PC, Switch, and mobile. Next, let's sort of segue towards the software. So before we even go there, once again, I've already mentioned that the RGB can be fine-tuned to your liking. In addition to that, you can program the back buttons, you can program the turbo, all on the controller itself without the need of any software. There is software that you can use with this controller, and it's called Keylinker. Keylinker is a mobile app that you need to get on your phone, and you then need to connect your controller via Bluetooth in order to set it up. Now, why would you use Keylinker at all if you can do practically everything on the controller? That's a good question. In fact, there are two things that you can only uniquely do with the application. Those two things are adjusting your dead zones for your analog sticks as well as your triggers, as well as setting up any curves for your analog sticks. By default, it will be set to linear. Two other features of this controller include vibration, which is actually pretty strong in this controller and can be pretty loud as well. So cautionary tale there, as well as gyroscope controls. I can't say that I've tested either of these features as I don't really play with vibration on and I don't play with any gyroscope controls. So overall, would I recommend this controller? Absolutely. In my experience so far, this is an inexpensive replacement to my Vader 4 Pro at the moment. For $60, a controller packed with these features is an incredible value. $60 Canadian, that is. If you can find this controller at $40 US, you're definitely getting a bargain. 1000 hertz polling rate, 4 rear buttons, trigger locks. The list goes on. Now, I've already mentioned that once I get my replacement FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro controller back, I'm going to be going back to that controller. So although I do plan to use the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro controller once I receive that controller back, the EASYSMX X20 is a very, very good controller that I plan to use as a backup and plan to use as my main until I get a replacement for the FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro. Now, if I didn't already have a FlyDigi Vader 4 Pro and purchase this first, I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't be looking for another controller at this point. So if we're just talking about the EASYSMX X20 on its own, standalone, looking for a controller with 4 paddles, 1000 hertz polling rate, and trigger locks, amongst other features, definitely take a look. And just to clarify, this wasn't sponsored in any way. I did not receive this free. I went out of my way to find this controller, purchase it, and use it for myself. Hope you found this video informative and educational. And if you have a contact at GameSir, please contact them and ask them why they haven't released a 4-paddle controller yet. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to sound off below. Nation Wolf out.